One day, in a dark and sinister forest on the outskirts of a small village, strange and terrible events began to happen. The villagers disappeared one by one, their bodies with torn throats and brutally mutilated bodies. Fear and horror gripped the residents. Their houses became like shutters in which people tried to hide from death, but unsuccessfully. The locals believed that a bloodthirsty werewolf, a monstrous half-wolf, half-human creature, lives in the forest, which turns into a monster on a full moon and goes hunting. One of the victims was a young and handsome guy named Alexander, who was a charming and desirable man in the village. He was found in the woods, his throat was torn and his body mutilated. Therefore, people believed that the werewolf was chasing not only the villagers, but also everyone who fell into his clutches. One day, one of the women said that when she was walking through the forest, she saw a bloodthirsty beast looking at her from a dark thicket, which seemed huge and terrible. However, none of the villagers had ever seen a werewolf in person, and all the terrified stories sounded like made-up legends. But one night during the full moon, one of the men heard an ominous howling wolf curse, and when he looked out the window, he saw a huge dark creature disappearing into the forest. In the depths of the forest, villagers discovered an old abandoned hut, which, in their opinion, could be inhabited by a werewolf. A small group of brave village hunters decided to go to an abandoned hut to find and destroy the monster. However, as soon as they entered the hut, they were attacked by a strong werewolf attack. The only one who managed to survive was a brave young hunter named Maxim. He was able to wound the werewolf and get out of the hut to save his life. When Maxim was returning to the village, he felt that he was being followed. A patterned object flashed in the sky on a strip of bright moon, and Maxim came to himself on a palpable, detail-abounding firebrand, his suit, cut from a rough bag of vague yellowish coloring. Shoes made of almost recognizable tactile fabric with almost stylized socks with slightly freckles embedded, with a narrower, very thick edge easily combined with a darkly open in gold. Darkening almost with quiet joy, the curler noticed that smoking had become even more primitive. The shiny figure focused blurred in a light dark brown suit. Touching the light path all around the perimeter started, confirming his quick, muted gaze. The combination of this cave are reinforced by the previous residual cell coinspious and an orange, in part to replace. For exactly the floored solace brought music to storage and disinformation with excitement. The urine of the blind. The progressive wild werewolf found twisted pleasure in hunting humans. He had his own reason. Maxim knew that the werewolf was not just a predator. He was a link in a chain of events that were somehow connected with the village's past. 50 years ago, an ancient pact was made in the village with the forces of darkness, and it was linked to the victims of the werewolf. Maxim began research and tried to uncover the secret of the dark forces that led to the resurrection of the werewolf. He rummaged through the archives of the village and unearthed old legends and tales of predictions that foreshadowed the arrival of the werewolf and misfortune for the village. However, in the course of his investigation, Maxim began to feel that dark forces began to crowd him with every step. When I entered the mysterious house, a strange feeling came over me. The air was filled with the smell of old books, ancient scrolls, and unknown herbs. I walked carefully through long corridors, curved staircases, and mysterious rooms, as if plunging into a world of mystical secrets and mysteries. Mysterious objects were lost in every corner of my view, reminding me of the distant past and mysterious origin. I looked around, trying to figure out how I ended up in this place, completely devoid of the usual attachments and routine. However, the further I moved deeper into the house, the more I was besieged by the feeling that something was wrong here. The dark shadows of old furniture samples created a play of light and shadow, causing the imagination to dance violently with doubts and misunderstandings. I carefully touched the dusty surface of an antique vase, exquisitely decorated with the image of monstrous monsters, and immediately felt that something had gone wrong. Everything around me began to shake, as if the world I found myself in was just an illusion, and reality was beginning to open up for me. I rushed to the door, trying to get out, but it slammed in front of me, as if it presented an obstacle to my escape. I looked around for the key, feeling that time had disappeared, as if the grains of sand were slowly disappearing from an hourglass. But the more I searched, the more it became clear that this house was not ordinary. That antique paintings hanging on the walls seemed alive, their brown eyes watching me closely. The old fireplace began to crackle, although there had been no wood burning in it for a long time. It seemed that the objects around me began to come to life, as if they were gradually letting me know that I had entered a world where unusual rules rule. I went outside to catch my breath, but the house seemed endless. The corridors twisted, the rooms changed their sizes, and every time I tried to return to the starting point, the world around me changed. I began to realize that this house could not be an ordinary building. Perhaps he was a portal that took me to another world, or maybe even in time. A single lamp located on an old table caught my attention. I picked it up, and suddenly the world around me froze. In the surrounding silence, I heard a faint rustling under the floor. Looking down, I noticed a hidden door that opened a secret passage into the dungeon of this mysterious house. When I went down into the dungeon, the gloomy corridors absorbed me with their atmosphere. The walls were covered with lichen, the cold was coming from the corners, and it seemed to me that something mysterious was watching my movements in the dark. I moved forward resolutely, trying to penetrate the secrets of this place. It took a long time before I discovered a door with carvings decorated with ancient symbols. I touched the structure, and the door creaked open slowly. A huge cave opened up in front of me, illuminated by a dim light of unknown origin. In the distance, I saw strange artifacts decorated with mysterious runes. I moved forward cautiously, trying to discern what it was. Suddenly, I heard strange sounds, like a whisper coming from the dark corners of the cave. And then suddenly, I felt something cold and sharp on my neck. I looked around cautiously and saw a dark figure standing behind me. I was captured. A mysterious figure told me to go ahead. I succumbed to her demand, fortunately, that I had no choice in such a situation. When Jake woke up, he found himself in an unfamiliar place. The room was small, lit only by the dim light of a lamp hanging from the ceiling. Jake rubbed his eyes and tried to remember how he got here. His last memories were vague. He recalled that he was walking down the street and suddenly felt a blow from behind. That's all. He got out of bed and looked around. The room was empty except for a bed, a chair, and a small table. The door was locked. The window was barred. Jake began to panic. Who kidnapped him? And why? He started knocking on the door and shouting, but no one answered. Finally, after several hours, the door opened and a tall man with a gloomy expression entered the room. He introduced himself as Mr. Smith and explained that Jake was in the building of their secret organization and they needed his help. Jake was confused. What kind of organization, and why did they kidnap him? Mr. Smith did not give him time to think and began to tell him about their mission. It turns out that the organization was engaged in the fight against international terrorist groups, and they needed a computer security specialist. That was exactly what Jake was. At first, he didn't believe this story, but as Mr. Smith revealed the details of their operations, he began to realize that he was really in serious trouble. Jake was confused. He knew that cooperating with such an organization could be dangerous, but he also realized that if he refused their offer, his life could be in danger. He had to make a decision, to agree or take a risk. After much thought, Jake decided to accept Mr. Smith's offer and help them in the fight against terrorist threats. He understood that this was a dangerous matter, but he also understood that he had no other choice. That's how Jake's new life began. He was taught new skills, given a new identity, and became an indispensable member of the organization. His job was extremely dangerous, hacking, espionage, and sometimes even had to make contact with terrorists. However, he was devoted to his new business and thought he was doing a good thing. One day, during one of the operations, Jake found out that his target is the organization in which he is now manipulating information and making money by creating an artificial threat in order to get more money and power. He realized that his personal beliefs had been violated, and he had to do something. Jake faced a difficult moral choice. He understood that if he was released, his life would be in danger because he knew too much. But he also understood that he could not continue to work for an organization that fakes information and manipulates people. The decision has been made, but how will he act? Will he be able to get out of this trap and tell the world the truth? Will he be able to get out of this trap and tell the world the truth?